Hello and welcome to the first episode of Gird Up Your Loins. My name is Logan Merrick. I am a small town pastor, and this podcast was made for the men in my church, but it's made for all Christian men. So if you find yourself here and you are not a part of Christ Our Cornerstone Church in O'Neill, Nebraska, I welcome you. And for those men who are a part of my church, I am so grateful for you and so thankful that you're here. I'm essentially calling this Gird Up Your Loins because Gird Up Your Loins is something that God said to Job, which basically means he said it to Job after Job was like complaining. And God's like, hey, gird up your loins, which means cinch up your belt and prepare yourself for battle because I'm about to take you to school, son. So it's a way of just basically saying in our modern day terms, man up. And so that's what this podcast is. It's about manning up, but it's not just like another men's podcast. It's not about all the hard stuff and training to be harder and all this, that, and the other. It's not also meant to be this big Bible study. It's meant to help you become the man who God made you to be, the man who your wife respects, and the man who your church needs you to be. So I'm going to do things like unpack a verse for you to be thinking about and memorizing throughout the week. I know you're busy. I know you don't like to read. I know that there is so much, but listen, to grow as a believer is to do hard things. To be a man is to do hard things. You were made to do hard things. And that just doesn't mean working a job. Working a job is good. You must do those things. You must do that. It's more than just providing food. You must do that too. But it's about growing as a believer and leading your family spiritually. And so that's what this podcast is all about. So we're going to do things like each time we get together once a week, it's going to be unpacking a verse. And I'd love for you to memorize that verse for the week. The other thing we're going to do is you're going to learn a little bit of theology. I'm not going to talk over your head. I'm going to make it very plain, very clear. And it will have each theological term that you learn will have to do with what I'm discussing this week. And then we're going to do things like the dusty old bookshelf, books that you should have on your bookshelf and you should have read. Okay. I can hear the groaning. Guess what? If you're in the truck and you're trucking, if you're in the tractor and you're farming, if you're on the ranch and the side by side, going around and doing whatever you do with the cows, giving them feed or checking on them or giving them medicine, whatever, you can literally have all of these books on audiobook and listen to them. If you are a father or a grandfather, these should be books that you read to your kids. And so we're going to talk about that. The other thing that we're going to do in our time together is I'm going to have a challenge to you each week. And I'm also going to have a question for you to ask your wife to get to know her better. Well, I've been married to her 50 years. I know her. Now, I bet you don't know her as good as you think you do. Well, what do you know? Well, not a whole lot, but what I've learned is to truly know someone is to ask good questions. And we as men don't really ask good questions at times. So with that being said, this is the first episode. I'm really excited. So let's dive in. This first episode, I am titling this episode, as you probably saw, The Most Dangerous Man You'll Ever Defend Your Family Against is You. You'd be like, what are you talking about? Well, that's what we're going to dive into right now. The most dangerous man you'll ever defend your family against is you. And so you could be thinking, how can I be the biggest threat to my family? Well, you're the one that interacts with your wife and your kids and your grandkids all the time. So if I was to ask you though, men, what's the biggest threat to your family? I would probably hear things like, well, if you've got boys, pornography, and I mean, I know it's ravaging girls at this point too, pornography, or you'd say the culture, or you could say drugs, or you could say bad influences, social media, false teaching, Maybe things like an abusive boss or school bullies, those things. And those are real dangers. And I see on social media these challenges all the time for men, especially Christian men. That's like something along the lines of like, you've got to train to get harder and stronger in order to protect your family against what could be coming. And it's like, yeah, true. Like I am a man who God has entrusted this family to risk my life for, to protect them at all costs. Yes, that is very true. But many, 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 many of us will never experience that. And so we're always looking around thinking about the threat that's out there when really, I just dropped my Bible, when really the threat that we really need to protect against is at home, and it's us. We may lock our doors and we teach our kids discernment and we work hard to provide and we carry the weight of wanting our families to be safe. But in the end, you are the one who most interacts with your wife and your children. So before you turn this off, I'm not saying you're a monster. Just hang with me. All right. I'm not talking about a man who is trying to destroy his family. I had to pick my Bible up off the ground. I'm not talking about a man who is actively trying to be dangerous to his family. I'm not talking about a man who's abusive. I'm talking about the ordinary Christian man who loves his wife, loves his kids, and as I said, works hard every day like I know you guys do. So then what are you talking about? Well, I'm talking about this. What I have learned is the greatest damage that has ever been done to my wife and kids, the people I love most, it came from moments when I neglected my own heart and my own walk. And so things fell out of my mouth that I did not mean, that was hurtful, that was daggers. The things I've done, I've never physically abused my family, ever. But I've said things that were harsh. And that should not be. Why? Why have I done that? And I know you probably have too. Well, it happens because we're not walking with the Lord. We're not caring for our own souls. We're busy. And so impatient words, unchecked pride of myself, my own selfishness, my own anger, fear is another thing that will grip me and cause me to do things that are hurtful to my family. The need to always be right and win an argument with my wife. And so I'll say things, do things, accuse her of things that aren't true. Only because I have to have the last word. I have to be the one who's right. The pressure I put on people because I hadn't dealt with what is going on inside of me. We're going to talk a little bit about that in other episodes. And so many times the man in the mirror is the man who you are most fighting against. So that brings me to 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 16. This is a verse I want you to memorize. I want you to memorize this verse. And here's what it says. Paul says to Timothy, who's a young man in the faith, who is pastoring a church that Paul has planted. He says, keep a close watch on yourself and on your doctrine or your teaching. Persist in this, for by doing so, you will save both yourselves and your hearers. Think about the order. Paul doesn't begin with keep a close eye on your church, Timothy. Oh, he's supposed to watch his church. He doesn't say keep a close watch on the culture, Timothy. Keep a close watch on false teachers, Timothy. He doesn't even start with Timothy's ministry. What does he say? Keep a close watch on yourself, Timothy. So before you can shepherd anyone, well, I'm not a shepherd. I'm not a pastor, brother. Yes, you are. You are the head of your household. You are the pastor of your home. it falls on you to shepherd them and love them well and teach them the word of God. So before you can shepherd and lead anyone, it starts with you. You must shepherd your own heart. Before you lead your family, make sure you're following Christ. Before you guard your family, guard the man who's been entrusted with leading them. Man, I think this is where so many of us get it backwards. We're always, like I said earlier, we're always scanning the horizon for threats while also neglecting the one place Scripture tells us to examine first. Us, the man in the mirror, the sinful man who has an amazing ability to justify our own sin. The man who can explain away his anger just because he's tired or he's stressed or he's just got a lot going on or there's a lot of bills to be paid and not enough money at the end of the month. The one who excuses his passivity because he's busy. I can't read the scriptures right now. I can't help you with dinner right now. I'm busy. I can't be the one to shepherd our home or lead us in prayer because I'm busy. Who baptizes his harshness as leadership. Well, I'm just being a man and I'm teaching them what a man is. Who confuses providing with shepherding. Who thinks because he goes to church, his soul, well, it must be healthy. But brother, these are lies. This is the heart of a master who has mastered self-deception. That's why we don't just need to watch the world around us, but we need to keep a close watch on ourselves because we lie to ourselves. Because if I don't shepherd my own heart, eventually my wife and my children will live life in a way. Let me back up and say this again because I got ahead of myself. I must shepherd my own heart because eventually my wife and my children will live with whatever I refuse to confront, even if it's not healthy. And brothers, let me tell you, I have a wife who's very independent, very strong as a woman, and she will call out my sin, and I don't like it. But you know what? And we have knockdown, drag out arguments about it. And at the end of the day, I know that she's right. It's just my own selfishness. It's my own sinfulness. It's my own unwillingness to walk in sanctification. What is sanctification? I'm going to get to that in just a minute. That's our theology word for the day. But we have to keep a close watch on ourselves. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Logan, that sounds good, but what does it actually look like to keep a close watch over myself? Well, I'm glad you asked because that's where theology comes into relationship with practicality. And it's called sanctification. Now, let me just point something out to you. You guys have probably heard many of the stories of pastors who have fallen away, men who committed adultery, men who pornography had ate up, men who were living a life that they were not who they claimed to be on stage. How does that happen? Right here. The inability to keep a close watch over themselves. The inability to hold themselves to a standard. The inability to do the hard thing. So what happens? How do you find yourself in an adulterous or wanting an adulterous affair or lingering a little too long on that social media post by some woman in a bathing suit or whatever? How do these things begin to slip? Well, you can grow in a place of ingratitude. You can begin to take for granted the spouse you've been given. And so in that ingratitude and thinking she doesn't do enough for me or she doesn't have sex with me enough. And so you begin to, in your mind and in your heart and in your spirit, you are justifying your lust, You're justifying these dreams that you're dreaming. And it begins with ingratitude, and then it becomes bitterness. And the same thing happens to all of us as men. We begin to look at the other side of the fence and think that the grass is greener over there. And we don't think about the lives that we're destroying along the way. So, what is sanctification? Because this is the practicality of all that. And so I know some of you guys have heard that word, especially if you go to my church, you've heard that word used before, sanctification. And you may be like rolling your eyes going, man, that's a theological word. I don't know if I can remember it. I promise you, you can. Sanctification is a crucial term for you to know. That's why I'm using it. And so forget that it's a theological term. Theology is simply learning to think rightly about God. It's the study of God. That's what theology is. And if you think wrongly about God, you'll eventually think wrongly about yourself, your wife, your kids, your work, and your purpose. That's why I want us to dive theologically into things. And so good theology doesn't just fill our heads, it should reshape our lives. So, as I said, today's theological word that every Christian man should know is sanctification. It's a big word with a very simple meaning. Sanctification is God's lifelong work of making you look more like Christ. I will say that again. Sanctification is God's lifelong work of making you look more like Jesus. When you trusted Christ, you were justified immediately. What does that mean? What does justified mean? It means that Christ paid the debt. So your sin, God does not look at. He sees your son. He sees his son, Jesus. Here's the thing, though. Well, you said that it's God's lifelong process. Yes, and also yours. It's a partnership between the two. God will do his part and do most of the heavy lifting. You must do your part. What's your part? Running from sin, diving into the scriptures, learning, maturing, doing the hard work. That's what it is. It's literally the things that you guys already do, especially those men in my church who, you guys work on tractors and you do everything to fix the problem, to keep the business going, to keep the farm running, the ranch running, whatever. You are more willing to do that than you are to do the hard thing of diving into what's going on in your heart and getting to know God more, to become more like Christ. Keep doing the hard things, but do the hard things right here spiritually, because the ones at home are the ones you are doing this for. And so God isn't finished with you. Every day he's sanding rough edges. That's what sanctification is. It's exposing your pride. It's killing sin. It's growing in humility. It's teaching patience. Trust me, I'm growing in all these things. I'm not good at all these things. I'm not good at loving my wife and my kids well. I'll tell more about that stuff in other podcasts. I try to do my best, but I promise you this, as a pastor, I am working every day to be a better man and to be the man who looks more like Christ. So he's making you into the man he created you to be. And here's why this matters. Keeping watch over yourself isn't about becoming paranoid. It's about cooperating with what God is already doing. The Christian life isn't just asking, how can I protect my family? It's asking, Lord, what are you trying to change in me today? Now, before you think this is some new idea, Christian men have been wrestling with this for centuries. Okay? That's what Paul writes about. That's why he's literally telling Timothy. All right? So I told you we want to learn from brothers who have come before us, big brothers who have fought the fight before us. And so we're going to get into a little bit of church history and see our big brothers in the faith. And so today, that man that's dealing with this issue in particular, his name is John Owen. He understood this. John Owen understood this idea, the whole thing of sanctification very, very, very well. So who is John Owen? Listen up. Here we go. Class is in session, my boys, my friends, my men. Owen was a 17th century English pastor. He was a theologian and one of the greatest Puritan writers ever. He lived through political upheaval. He pastored faithfully, suffered the loss of most of his children, and wrote extensively about the Christian life. Not from an ivory tower, okay? Not a guy who writes about these things as if he's not lived a hard life, or some man that's like, writing about it in this idea. No, he's living a hard life. That's what the whole not living in an ivory tower. Hard life, man. But through deep personal suffering, he lived in constant dependence on Christ. And so he understood something that many of us forget. The greatest battle a Christian man fights isn't out there. It's in here. It's in our hearts. And his most famous quote, write this down. If you're driving, wait, but I want you to put it in your notes somehow. This is a quote you need to live by. Be killing sin, or sin will be killing you. Be killing sin, or sin will be killing you. And I love that quote because it doesn't let me coast. It pierces me. Sin isn't content to quietly sit in the corner while I lead my family. It's always lurking. Jesus told Peter to be on your guard. Peter tells us that in his own letter. He says, hey, the lion, the enemy is a lion, and he is watching, and he's waiting, and he's looking to pounce. He's waiting for the one who is not necessarily on his guard. So which means this, always be watching yourself. Always be watching yourself. So this now leads me to the next thing. I told you, I'm going to challenge you to read. And all I want you to do, read just a page. This book that I'm recommending that should be on your bookshelf, the dusty bookshelf, as I'm calling it, every Christian man should have this book on his bookshelf, and he should have read it. They have it in a children's book format, or you can get it in a novel format, whatever works for you. But you should read it. Read it to your kids and your grandkids. Know it. Understand it. Men, read. I don't like to read. It's called self-discipline. Force yourself to do it. Page at a time, whatever it takes. I don't care how easy, listen to an audiobook, whatever it takes. Okay. But Ben, we need to be readers, because the God who we serve and the God we're pointing our wife and children to has given us everything we need to know about him in book. So we need to be readers. Real men are readers. I don't care if you're smarter than everyone else. That's not my goal. My goal is for you to be a well-rounded man who loves the arts, but loves the Lord more. Books also introduce us to mentors that we'll never get a chance to meet. But if there's one book outside of the Bible that belongs on every man's bookshelf, it's Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. Outside of the Bible, this book has sold more copies than any other book except the Bible. And so here's the idea of the book. Okay. It's a man whose name is Christian. Yes, his name is Christian because he's a Christian. He leaves the city of destruction and begins a journey to the celestial city. Yes, this is an allegory of a story of a man's Christian life. And so along the way, he battles temptation, he battles pride, he battles fear, doubt, discouragement, false teachers, and his own wandering heart. He has this big, gigantic burden that he's carrying along with him. And every person, every place, and every event is an allegory for the Christian life. And so here's why every Christian man should read it. Because eventually you realize that you are Christian. You carry burdens. You have wandered into the slough of despondence. You've climbed the hill of difficulty. You've fought Apollyon. You've doubted. You've wanted to quit. You've had friends who encouraged your faith and others who have tried to pull you away from it. In other words, you are the story. And so the book reminds us that becoming a godly man isn't a sprint. It's a pilgrimage. It's a long obedience in the same direction. Read 10 pages before bed. Read 1 page before bed. But read. Take your time. Underline it. Talk with your kids and your wife about it. Then someday, hand your copy with all of your notes in the margins to your son, your grandson, your daughter, your granddaughter. That's the kind of inheritance that lasts, brothers. So before we wrap up, I want to give you one assignment. Not a Bible study, okay? Don't worry. It's not another book to read, not another leadership principle. I want you to know your wife. So we're always going to end out every podcast with a question for you to ask your wife to get to know her more. I want to help you know your wife better because somewhere along the way, a lot of us as men stopped dating our wives and just started managing a household together. And so those aren't the same things. So here's tonight's conversation that I want you to have. Don't ask it while she's folding laundry. Don't ask while you're scrolling your phone. I want you to put the kids to bed if you still have kids at home. Sit on the porch or in your bed or in the living room. Pour a cup of coffee, whatever you want to do. Go for a drive. But I want you to look her in the eyes and I want you to ask this question. What have I done lately that has made you feel especially loved and why? Then listen. Don't interrupt. Don't explain. Don't defend. Nothing. All these questions that I'm going to give you, just ask and listen. Because our wives are going to tell us how to know them better, how to love them better. So it's with that I will leave you with that one question. So memorize those verses, brothers. Memorize 1 Timothy 4:16. Keep close watch over yourself. Pick up a copy of Pilgrim's Progress, read it, and then ask your wife that question. I hope you found this helpful. Come back again next week. I'll have another book. Yes, another book. I'll have another question to ask your wife. I will have more Bible to unpack together. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, would you share this with another man whom you love and respect? And if you've ever got any questions, feel free to hit me up on Facebook or Instagram, or you can email me at our church. You can go to christourcornerstonechurch.com, and there you will find a way to contact me there. Have a great rest of your week. We will see you again next week.